Shooting the shiznit, shooting the shiznit. Best little wrestling podcast in the business. Your host BT and all his guests. You'll never know who he'll have next. Shooting the shiznit, shooting the shiznit. Best little wrestling podcast in the business. Shooting the shiznit.
All right. We're live from 304 Studios in Jonesboro, Arkansas. This is an STSPOD.club production. This is the 7th annual, all episodes, Memphis in May. And believe it or not, this is a leftover episode. We're in June, but it's still Memphis in May. And this is the flagship show, Shooting the Shiznit. My guest, I'm going to have to do it, Barnabas, is Barnabas. He's either the leader, the ringmaster, tippy top, the entertainer. Welcome, Barnabas. I'm BT, and that's Barnabas over there. How's it going, man?
I have heard many an impression of yours truly, but that, by and far, was the worst impression of my exquisite voice that I've ever heard.
I'll have you do it by the end of the show. We'll have you do the real version.
It's about time somebody came on this show to take you to the tippy top of the YouTube scene, if you know what I mean.
Oh man, you have blasted on to Memphis Wrestling. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But as I do on Shooting the Shiznit, the flagship show, I either bring somebody I've known forever in the business, and we just sat down since I'm an old fart, been around since 1978 watching wrestling. So I bring somebody that I've known forever or someone I've never met. We have never crossed paths, even with you being in the area. Never. So here we go. Growing up, tell us about Barnabas growing up as a fan.
So growing up a fan, I am originally from upstate New York. So you can tell why the Memphis Mizarks are so infuriating to me, because I have to step down, lower myself to even try to communicate between the almost Queen's English that's spoken in a great state, the Empire State of New York, compared to the Mizark mumblings of the Memphis wrestling fans. But as I was growing up a youngster in New York, believe it or not, my first exposure to professional wrestling was through world-class championship wrestling.
Was it on late night one after Star Trek or something for me? That's what it was. It was after Star Trek.
There were many promotions after, including Bill Watts' UWF, that was like that. But World Class used to come on every Saturday, I think around noon. It was on WRGB Channel 6, which was one of the very first television stations in the entire country. And I eventually actually went to work for that television station behind the scenes once upon a time. But that's where I fell in love with wrestling. The Von Erichs and the Freebirds, all the vibrant characters, the Missing Link, Chris Adams, Gino Hernandez. But I also absolutely fell in love with the professional wrestling manager. People like Gary Hart, one of my absolute strongest managerial influences. Percy Pringle, who would later become Paul Bearer, another huge influence. But the style of that promotion absolutely began to mold and shape the vibrant personality that is Barnabas the Ringmaster, or one of your favorites, Barnabas the Producer.
Did you growing up there, you're in New York and you're watching Texas wrestling, Southern wrestling, which, had still has kind of a bad rap. When you work in Memphis, it's the Memphis style. That's what they used to call it. And you being from New York, Vince Russo has a saying, everybody from the South hates people in New York, especially Jim Cornette. He especially hates people in New York. But you grow up, you're looking at Texas wrestling. This is a total different thing than WWF. And if you didn't grow up watching World Class and you just watched WWF, you would notice the total difference. When did you discover there was something else out there?
So fairly early on, I got turned on to the many wrestling magazines. Obviously, you know, we all call them the After Mags, named after Bill Apter. And you've been around a hot minute, my friend. So,
we've had Bill Apter here, and he says that's just one of those things that it turned into being called the Apter Mags because of him.
He had such a strong influence. I've been very blessed to have an opportunity to speak with Bill on a few different occasions. And, you know, I've told him the fact that, you know, over the years, my love affair with wrestling, like, I could contribute it to the magazines, but in a lot of ways, I trace it back to Bill, because Bill's connections, Bill's presentation, you know, the fact that he was able to spotlight a business that was very much closed off to the public and made it accessible for you and myself and a lot of us through those magazines. It was huge. I mean, those magazines were very much the passport to the world, so to speak. Not just the wrestling world, but just the world. Just seeing pictures of the UK and Australia and Japan and Mexico, and just, you know, eyes, you know, just completely wide open at the thought of the possibility of maybe one day. And it was through those magazines that I, you know, fell in love with, you know, the Road Warriors. I specifically remember they were on the cover of PWI at one point and just being mesmerized by their look. You know, Ric Flair and the NWA, and those magazines also introduced me to Memphis wrestling.
Oh, wow.
Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman, Jimmy Hart, et cetera, et cetera. So it began my fascination with learning more about the territory. And where I lived, we didn't get Memphis wrestling on our television at all. So my only access to you know, the art, the Memphis wrestling art, was through the magazines, or later when I got my first VCR through Finger Hut. You remember Finger Hut?
Oh, my God. I've told the same story, my brother. That's where we got ours from. Finger Hut. And
so I grew up in upstate New York. I was just out of range of where cable would go. And this was when satellite dishes were like you know, I grew up very poor. So
me too, my brother. Me too.
A lot of commonality.
You know what? You know what my dad used to call Finger Hut?
What's that?
It was where poor people got electronics.
Pretty much, man. Pretty much. But because I couldn't get cable, like, I just fantasized about finally getting a VCR. And when I finally was able to get one through our friends at Finger Hut, I started getting these VHS tapes, and I got all kinds of tapes, anything I could get at retail stores, all kinds of oddities that I could find. But then there was a series of VHS tapes that were released called Wrestling Gold. And they covered a ton of the Memphis territory.
Right.
You know, things like a lot of footage of Joe LeDuc and Lawler, the tag match between The Rock and Roll and Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo, where Randy pile drove Ricky through a table, which I believe is the first time anyone's been put through a table. But all the fire, all the antics, all the craziness of Memphis, is like, how could you not be a fan of the absolute splendid insanity that is Memphis? And over the years, because I didn't have access to TV, like, YouTube has been an absolute godsend.
Oh, yes.
I've been able to go on and like rediscover. I just, not too long ago, like, just to show you the obscurity of the things that I've been finding, like, obviously Tommy Dreamer is a regular with us now in Memphis wrestling. And I knew obviously about the whole Jerry Lawler, Jim Cornette, you know, rivalry with ECW back in the 97, 98 timeframe. But like, the idea of those guys coming to Memphis, especially Tommy back in, like, you know, 1997, I had no idea. So just little things like that are all brand new to me. So it's just rediscovering the brand, rediscovering the product, stumbling upon things that I've never seen before, realizing that Memphis, I've always known, has been an incredibly influential territory, but to look at just the mass of superstar talent that has gone through those doors and has worked in that area is absolutely mind-blowing. So, when you have somebody the caliber of The Rock who comes to Memphis, and everywhere else he's going, he's absolutely just dogging people with that heel persona, that final boss persona. But when he comes to Memphis, he stops in his tracks and goes, "We're not doing that here because I love Memphis."
Right.
I don't know how much more of a stamp of approval that a territory or a city could get, but I love Memphis wrestling.
Well, I grew up watching. So you're looking at me every 11 o'clock every Saturday morning for an hour and a half, and I would. My mom took me. The neighbors across the street, the kids were going to. Well, I was a kid, but the kids were going to wrestling that night, while my dad and his dad went to the bars. So our moms took us to wrestling, and I was hooked from then on. And I would watch. My grandmother and my mom wanted to leave at 12 o'clock so we could go to lunch and shop. And I'd only get that first hour. I didn't get the 90 minutes. I had a question, but that was me. I mean, I grew up I maybe missed at one point until the 90s when I got out of college and owned my own business. I had not missed a Memphis show. I had seen some of Memphis, and then you trade. I actually started trading VHSs, and I'm not going to admit this, but I think maybe I might have sold some too. I might have. Kayfabe. But yeah,
phone calls will be made after this episode.
That's how I got to learn about everything everywhere.
Sure.
But you said a couple things. Number one, that Memphis and noticing Memphis and all the people that came through Memphis. I go through rabbit holes on YouTube now because when you was growing up and you saw the Flair Lawler thing, you thought you'd never see it again. And I can watch it. We can quit right now and go watch it if you want to. I mean, that's how it is.
Sure.
But if you get in a rabbit hole in Pacific North, if you go to Portland and watch their TV and their style, and then watch the people that come through it, it's just so fun to watch the old territories and the way they did things. Not always one of those guys that says, the new wrestling's bad. I don't do that. I like all styles of wrestling. What I wanted to ask you when you was talking about those magazines, and I had the hardest problem because remember you actually
You're
set
gonna
it
ask
up.
me about those advertisements for the apartment wrestling.
I was going to ask you, did you do like I did? You went through them to decide which magazine you bought because it had those advertisements in it. Look. All right, this one's got, because I could get one. I could maybe afford one. There's no way I was going to go home. No, I was going to ask you. There's a couple things at the magazines I always crack up thinking about them. Was there somebody that Bill put over, like huge, and then the first time you saw them, you was like, wait, I don't get it. I don't know why he's so popular. I don't know why Bill likes him so much. Is there anybody there? And the pronunciation of the names, Barnabas. DiBiase was, I never watched Georgia Championship Wrestling. I had his name was DiBiase forever in my household. Well, it was just me, but in my mind, that's what his name was. So anybody you could think of?
That Bill hyped.
And you're going to die when I tell you who he hyped, and everybody on this show is going to say, BT, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But I'll tell you who I was not impressed with, still not a fan of, even back then. So,
you want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead. Tell me.
Okay. So, they're really the only person that really comes. There's two people. And I'm going to bring them up, and this is no disrespect to either one of them because they are both absolute all-time greats.
I'll say the same when I say mine. Yeah.
You know, but you know what one, and it's not so much that even Bill hyped him. It's just somebody that throughout the course of wrestling history, at least his first run in the WWF, or it might have been WWF at the point when he was champ, but Bob Backlund's first run as WWF champion, he never did it for me.
Never did it for me neither.
There was nothing about him, and I don't know so much if Bill was necessarily on his gravy train, so to speak, but it's just somebody that came to mind that's been overhyped. Now his second run as the psychotic character, that's right up my alley. But the first run, just dry, bland, horrible promo, just great athlete, but just did nothing for me. The only other person, and again, I don't even know how much Bill really promoted him, and I've met him on a number of occasions, and he's such a good guy, and he is an incredible talent. Ronnie Garvin, especially as NWA World Champion, I
think I'm the only person alive that's, I'm the guy that likes matches that nobody likes, or the wrestlers nobody likes. And I liked Ronnie Garvin. I may be the only one that did. I don't know.
I did like him. I did like him as, when he, strangely enough, the time that I really started to dig Ronnie Garvin was when he came to the WWF. And when he had the run with Greg Valentine,
see, I don't even remember
the Garvin
that.
stomp and the whole time. So that's where I really became a fan of Ronnie. But when it came to that build leading to the NWA title run, it made no sense, and it felt like it took the NWA title down a notch. And I understand from watching enough shoot interviews why they did what they did at that point, but I never really saw it. But again, I don't even know if I can necessarily say that Bill was trying to push or promote him, but
I think part of that was because he did win the belt, and then you started seeing him on the cover with the belt, and that was
that's definitely part of it. I do remember Bill. I'm getting kind of sidetracked here on a little bit of a tangent, but I remember the stories in the magazines where they would try to blur fantasy and reality. And I remember specifically reading a story at one point in one of the mags that had to do with Kabuki and Muda. And it was this brother.
They were related, or that was his dad?
Or wild out there story. And even as a kid, wanting to believe, begging to believe, I'm reading this going, man, this is some absolute high. I love Kabuki, and I absolutely love Muda.
I understand.
Gary Hart, I love.
Oh yeah, I didn't get keyed in on it. This was before I started getting kayfabe sheets, so I was still getting the magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And Lawler wrote a letter to Aftermags, and I went to get an autograph for Lawler at a local place here. He was doing a personal appearance, and he signed something for me. I said, I couldn't believe you sent that letter to Bill After. And he's like, I didn't send that. I mean, he would not even go with it. And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe we got some stuff that's just not on the up and up there. But my guy, oh, God, I've said this a couple times on the show, but don't make it a big deal, because I got a lot of people in the North, but Bruno Sammartino was not my guy. Yes, Bruno! I know. What the legend. I will not take anything away from him, but could not, after Bill had talked about him for years, and the first time I saw him, remember, I like the Lawler style. I like the Moondogs. I like the Fabs. And I'm looking at Bruno Sammartino, who's this big, hairy guy, this bear of a guy, if I might say. And I'm just like, he's slow. He's, just not what I like about wrestling. And for all this time, and I do a podcast with two ladies from New Jersey, and they have mentioned we just got started for the last 12 weeks. They've got Bruno Sammartino, and I've just sat back here like this, like, nah, I better not.
So Bruno, like I love Bruno, but Bruno also, I'm a New York guy, so
right.
It's like I started with World Class, but it's not like it ended with World Class. Like, my first, you talked about going to live wrestling when you were a kid. My first live event was Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant.
Oh, God.
Kong Bundy and Big John Studd at the Glens Falls Civic Center, maybe 85. So,
wow.
So around that time. So, I mean, there's a lot of WWF history too, but Bruno is absolutely the case of a great. He did well in different markets and he did well at points overseas, but he was very much a regional talent.
Yes.
And honestly, Jerry was a regional talent until he moved into commentary and went to work.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
He was over everywhere, but for the longest time, his flavor of ice cream was just, it made sense for that area. I mean, there's certainly people, you mentioned Portland. Roddy transcended Portland, but there are other people that, I don't know if Buddy Rose
maybe it's AEW run. Is AEW run?
Yeah, he had a good AWA run, and he had a little cup of coffee in WWF. But for the most part, like Portland was his territory, and a lot could even say people like Matt Bourne, who. Obviously he had the run as Doink and Big Josh, and I mean he worked everywhere. But I don't know if there was another place. Billy Jack.
Hey, Barnabas, let me tell you, we do a Patreon, and we'll do 5 questions at the end, and
okay.
I'll tell you why the guys went to Portland and worked on Patreon only. So yeah, it's kind of adult, but I'll tell you the reason why. Let's talk about you going from the fan to getting into business. Why did you want to be in the business?
Why did I want to be in the business?
Same reason I got into business, because it was just something you just had to do kind of thing.
So I'll try to make this, I'll give you the Campbell's soup condensed version.
All right.
So, but I'll try to make it as brief, but still entertaining as I can. So I've been fascinated with wrestling ever since I was a little boy, probably 5 or 6 years old at the oldest. It has been the one constant in my life. People come and go, finances come and go, women come and go. I love the ladies, but it happens. But wrestling has always been there. It has been my escape. It's been my salvation. It's been my muse. As many people in the business say, it's my mistress. What you know as well as I do, once you get bit by the wrestling bug, you're hooked no matter what. So when I first decided to start training to be involved with wrestling, my original goal was to be a wrestler. It wasn't to be a manager. It wasn't to be a commentator or announcer or anything. It was to be a wrestler. For a long time, I didn't think it was possible because, growing up in an era where giants ruled, Hulk and Andre and, Big John Studd and all these massive muscular guys, it wasn't really until Bret Hart ascended to a singles spotlight role as WWF champion where I'm like, well, man, I'm actually the same height as Bret. Maybe this isn't such a impossibility after all. And that probably sounds crazy for somebody that is familiar primarily with Memphis wrestling, because most of the Memphis guys were more normal sized guys.
Right. Yeah. First time I remember.
York,
yeah, I remember meeting the first time I was backstage and got real close. Dundee, I was a taller man than Dundee.
Sure. Yes.
Lawler, me and Lawler are the same size man. We're, shoulders, the whole thing. We're the same size.
Sure. So
it wasn't, yeah.
Everybody looks like absolute larger than life superstars on TV, but then you meet some of these folks and you realize like these are normal sized people. But being in that New York area and that New York territory, you look around and you go like, there's no way I could ever do this. But then Bret, one of the greatest of all time, but Bret showed me that maybe it was possible. So I started training maybe 98, 99, somewhere around that range, at a spot in Schenectady, New York, World of Hurt Wrestling. There's a version of it that still exists that's run by a fellow manager, Kenny Casanova, right now. And that's where I cut my teeth on wrestling. And I was there for a time, and I did a little bit. I was dealing with some back and neck issues, so I stepped away from the business, always with the intention of getting back.
Was there anybody there that, in the train, either in your class or the trainer, that people would know for today?
Oh, he would occasionally stop into training. He was involved in the area. It was one of the Baldies from ECW. Tony something.
I can't remember.
I feel terrible that I don't remember his last name, but HC Loke was another one. He did some time with ECW towards the end of their run. Salvatore Sincere.
Tom Brandy, yeah.
Tom Brandy. Tom Brandy was well known in that area. So those were all people that were, and then a lot of the guys there were journeyman wrestlers. They were folks that would do enhancement work for WWE or ECW or WCW even at that point. One of my best friends, Steve Cruz, I met through there. He was involved in a tag team, but mostly a regional talent, an excellent regional talent, but very much a regional talent. But I did my initial training. I stepped away, always with the intention of coming back. I moved from New York to Las Vegas. I was looking to get back into the scene there. There was really not. Now there's a bit of a scene in Vegas. At that point, there was like nothing. I almost ended up going to California to train with, to continue training with Rick Bassman's Ultimate Pro Wrestling. I went and toured facilities there in San Clemente and El Segundo. For those that aren't familiar, Rick Bassman's the one that's noted as discovering Sting and the Ultimate Warrior.
Right, yeah.
He's had a hand in training. I mean, when I was out there looking, it was probably shortly after the time that like John Cena and people like that had moved on. But like Cena was there, Samoa Joe was there, Frankie Kazarian was there. A lot of guys, Victoria, a lot of folks were there. I went. I just couldn't do the cost of living. Then I started looking at Cincinnati and possibly Louisville, because at that point, HWA was still a developmental territory for WWE, and obviously OVW was a developmental for WWE. So I ended up moving out, and life, failed relationships, financial issues, a lot of things sidetracked me to where, honestly, I thought that the wrestling dream had passed me by. I'm like, I'm too old. I'm never going to be able to resume this. And I actually started getting into doing ringside photography and video work, much like Jim Cornette, much like Paul Heyman.
That was the first thing I did. I took photographs, sent them to Bill Apter. That's how a lot of people get in the business.
Yes. So I had no intention at that point of trying to parlay that into getting back into the business. I just knew that again, you get bit by the bug and you can't deny it. So I just knew that I wanted to be more involved, and I started getting involved with the photography and video work, and then I was working with MMA promotions and boxing and live music, and but ultimately performing and being fully involved in the business is, in my heart of hearts, it's what I've always wanted to do. And in 2018, it's like that switch got flipped in my mind where I finally decided, you got some miles on you. You probably can't do a full wrestling schedule, but you can wrestle every now and then. And you definitely can talk, and you definitely can entertain. So, and I'd been in enough locker rooms at that point to see like the young talent coming up were athletically amazing, but when it came to character work and promo, like they needed help. And quite frankly, the younger cats out there just needed like they needed good people that could help mentor them, because it was like the blind leading the blind. It was just, one inexperienced guy leading another. And at times when veterans were around, I'm not saying this is true across the board everywhere, but sometimes people were taking advantage of younger talent. So I just saw these opportunities, like, okay, I could be a mentor. I could help with promo. I could help entertain. Like, there's a lot of things I knew that I could do in a managerial role. And I love the role of the manager. Like I said before, Gary Hart, Percy, Jimmy Hart, obviously, Cornette, Heenan, et cetera, et cetera. So I resumed my training with Cody Hawk here in Cincinnati. Cody is the individual who trained John Moxley, Sami Callihan, LA Knight. Just an excellent trainer, very patient. Believe it or not, I am not a natural athlete. I know it's hard to tell by looking at me.
Yeah,
but,
I wrestled until I started doing gimmick matches as a referee. I mean, as a manager, you do gimmick matches, but I wrestled 18 matches, and I took a look at those matches on video and said, I suck. So let's find out. Yeah, let's find out. And I want you to know, and I'm not talking about Memphis Wrestling, I'm talking about the other shows around. Maybe there is some guys that I might be still a better worker than them. They didn't watch our videotapes, but I did, and then I realized, and I say this to Dustin all the time, in the wrestling business, if you want to be in the wrestling business, there's always, I ran shows. And somebody said, "What can I do?" Well, you don't want to be no, I don't want to be a wrestler, but put chairs out, set up the ring. I mean, do whatever. Hey, we need somebody on a popcorn machine. I mean, seriously, there's something to do if you want to be part of professional wrestling. There are I guess it's about 7, 8, maybe 9 years ago. They had a show here in Jonesboro, and they said, BT, we want you to come out and watch this show, blah, blah, blah. And they were trying to set up. I just jumped in and started helping them. And they're like, we didn't want you to come do that. And I go, that's what you do. That's what you – but there's always a role for somebody.
But that is, to take it a little bit off on a side note, that's what we do. That's what ties us to the carnival and the circus days, is that the troupe would come in together, unified, set up, get everything ready. They want each other to do well because it helps to draw a bigger house so that everybody eats and everybody benefits. Then we all work together to tear down, and we move to the next town. This is not rocket science. But this is something that's been happening for, decades, if not hundreds of years at this point. And that tradition still lives on today through what we do in the pro wrestling industry, is that sometimes people get it twisted and they don't understand. They start thinking like, oh, well, I'm too good to do this or I'm too good to do that. No, you're not. None of us are.
I promoted shows and was setting up the ring almost every time. I was one of the guys and it was just one of those things you did. Let's take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to, how did we get involved in this incarnation of Memphis Wrestling with Barnabas the leader? God, that was really bad, wasn't it? That was bad. All right, back from commercial. Real quick on something you mentioned, and I keep thinking every time you mention his name, I'm like, I'm going to say something. Gary Hart. Now, I watched Gary Hart as a manager. And it took me years. I was not a huge Gary Hart fan. It took me years to realize the influence he was having on world class and everywhere this guy went. And have you read his book was my question. Have you read the book?
So not to name drop, but I'm going to name drop. I literally had this conversation very recently with Tommy Dreamer, where we were talking about Gary Hart. And same thing, he wasn't a big Gary Hart fan either, and he asked me about the book. So I've read excerpts from the book. I have not read the whole thing. Obviously, the book is scarce. It's hard to find, but the little bit that I have read has been right on the money.
Fantastic. So smart. Yes.
Absolutely. And there are there are shoot interviews you can find with Gary before he passed, where he talks about his booking philosophy and the territories and working and talking about Bruiser Brody. And like, I can't get enough of that stuff. The thing with Gary, from a physical standpoint, if you watch him at ringside and you just watch what he does, he's horrible. He's horrible because he did, like, somebody will punch him, somebody will try to bump him, and he won't move.
Well, I was taught, yeah. You'll
barely register anything, and it's horrible. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. It could have been Brody, it could have been Fritz von Erich, it could have been anybody that any other worker would have bumped their behinds off for, and Gary would barely register.
And he doesn't do much. He doesn't register. I was told by somebody, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody that knew more than I did at the time, is when I'm outside the ring as the manager, my gimmick was a coach. So here I am, a coach. He said, look, you got to register what's going on in the ring as if it is a shoot. Yes. Somebody's punching your guy. Somebody's body slamming your guy. And when he's getting his heat, then you're jumping up and down and saying, "Wow, look at this! Look at Don't take too much away from the match, but make sure you are responding and reacting to what's going on in the ring." But you're right. I guess that's and Gary. But after reading his book, I was just like, "Damn, what a wrestling mind!" Oh my God.
The thing with Gary is that, yes, he had an amazing mind for the business, and he was one of those cats where. And this was my defense when I was talking to Tommy about Gary, was like, yes, I know, like, physically he did barely anything, but but the promo and those eyes, those piercing eyes of Gary Hart, and when he would speak, he just had a very unique way of delivering a promo. It was dark and it was sinister, but he also had a little bit of jive, a little bit of sprinkle, almost Dusty Rhodes in there. It was such a unique presentation. And the reason why he was so successful is, what he did on screen stays with me to this very day, but it was the combination of what he was doing on screen, and obviously, most certainly, his ability to navigate the treacherous seas of the backstage.
Think of the personalities he had to deal with.
That's my point, and that's the side of being a manager that a lot of people out there watching from the outside in don't understand, is that it's not just going out there and choking somebody or pulling a leg or whatever the case may be. It's like you're performing, but then when it comes to the rest of the business of what you're doing, I mean, you're the mediator, you're the go-between, you're the babysitter.
I was all that.
You're all these things, man.
Yeah, I had four guys that I booked. We came in. I said, look, I want my guys against my guys. I'll book the storyline. Just give me a spot. First match, main event, I'll do it on wherever you need me.
Sure.
But I need to help these guys, and I need to be with them. But yeah, I did everything, and it's something that a lot of people don't do now. You don't help people get bookings because it's just something you don't do like I did. I did it the whole time I was part of the business. Let's get to Memphis. How did you end up? Are you still in Cincinnati? And do you travel from Cincinnati to Memphis for the tapings? Oh, wow. I'm sorry.
So I'm still.
Damn, I hate being in the car now.
So I question my sanity. I'm still being in Cincinnati, but yes, I'm still located in the area. Still make the drives down.
Why the Carney gimmick? You said you touched it just a little bit before we go into Memphis, because you came in as that gimmick. What fascinates you, or what you get excited about when it's the carnival and everything? Is that a childhood thing, or is that, hey, this is going to be unique, this is going to be a different gimmick? I always, and I say this, the shooting the shiznit, that's what it's about. We're bullshitting each other's, and I had somebody say, BT talks too much. Well, hell, it's my show. Come on. But my fascination with the carnival was exactly what you said, the coming into the town, leaving. But when I actually started comparing it with the wrestling business and noticing, I remember the first time I was out talking to some guys in the business, and they started talking carny. Two of the guys to the left of me, because I was talking to somebody I knew, and me and him was talking. We were talking about everything. We was talking about here's what what do you think? Well, this is what you need, blah, blah, blah. But they'd never seen me. I was never part of they started talking carny. And to this day, I could only say a few words. But I remember traveling with my middle daughter, and we spoke carny the whole trip with the signs, the cities, the names of the cities.
Yeah.
We would do carny, and we drove my mom nuts. What the hell? What are you doing? And it's have you heard Pig Latin? Have you heard that? It's kind of a version of a Southern language that probably more South than me, but it was called Pig Latin in the way they did it. But there's words that I use the Mizark thing. I say that all the time. I'll do it sometimes with my wife where I'm saying something. She'll go, "What the hell?" But okay, so you're a carny character. You're going to answer that question. But here's the second question with it, and you can throw it in there. Can you talk carny?
So I'll answer the second one first. A little bit. And I
yes,
mean
that's
me too. So it's still something that I'm trying to learn more.
I have to think before I say the word. So that's the only
So I'm still not at a point where I can fluently speak it. And honestly, the person that encouraged me to learn more how to speak carny was Ricky Morton.
Oh wow.
But based upon the gimmick. He's like, you should really know how to at least speak some carny, and he was absolutely right. So I've been trying to teach myself. It's very much like I know people that are fluent in it and can do it, right off their tongue. Like it doesn't seem that difficult, and I'm sure that it really isn't.
I think it's just like any other language, Barnabas. I can't even speak English, so what the fuck, So I have a hard time. I have a Southern English, so hell, I've got handcuffs on talking anyway. But it's true.
But yes, but the speaking carny is something that I'm trying to teach myself more, and the Mizark word that I drop into promos consistently online or in person at the shows, like that's just that little sample. I didn't want to do too much carny talk. I may sprinkle more words in as we go along, but I didn't want to do too much because I didn't want the crowd to be too confused. But I knew that at least calling them Mizarks, even if they don't understand exactly what I'm saying, they know it's derogatory towards them.
Right.
And that's all I need. That's all I need to just turn the screw just a little bit more and get the reaction that I want. But to address your first question, my fascination with carnival, sideshow, freak show, like one of my absolute favorite shows to watch as a kid every single week was Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Oh, yes,
hosted by Jack Palance.
Yes.
And just his voice. There was always something that was so dark and creepy about his voice and the presentation about that show. And there was something that always fascinated me about just the odd, the bizarre, the strange, the unusual, shows like that, shows like Tales from the Dark Side or just programming like that, The Twilight Zone, just things that were a little bit different, a little bit darker, a little bit more off the beaten path. And by virtue of in wrestling, nothing stays stagnant. If you're going to survive in the business, like the business is ever changing. What was in and what the tastes were 6 months or a year ago aren't necessarily what people are digging on right now today. So you constantly have to be able to adapt and adjust to the times. Anyone that's followed my career prior to Memphis up till today, they know that I've gone through this, wave of periodically altering and changing what I do or coming up with completely different personas. If you had asked me a few years ago if I would ever run two different versions of what I do, I would say absolutely not. I'm focused on one. But then circumstances happen and opportunities manifest, and you realize, like, what if I started this ringmaster character to suit the needs of what we have over here, but then continue to be David Barnabas Spector, which is a name that probably a lot of the Memphis fans aren't familiar with, but people outside of Memphis may know, if I continue on with a variation of that. So that's been an interesting dynamic. But the circus, I was toying with an idea of being this ultimate showman. And a lot of it had to do with wanting to try to be a human version of Jack Skellington because of his voice, his body language, his movements. There was just something about that particular character, and people love that character. For whatever reason, people love Nightmare Before Christmas, and they really love that character. And I'm like, how could I take parts of this and bringing it into wrestling? And then I started playing with this idea of being this ultimate showman. And that morphed into me being this ringmaster. And I was working with a promotion called Control Your Narrative that was run by EC3 and others.
Right.
And that's really where the circus really was born and really took off. Originally, I was going to utilize existing talent in their system, and just it got to a point where I knew that if I didn't take the initiative and put together the group myself, that I would be waiting forever. A lot of times in wrestling, you have to be the one to take initiative. You have to put your best foot forward. You have to initiate the process. Otherwise,
you have to present your idea forward. And
Yes.
this is what we're going. And a lot of people, and that's what I love about Memphis Wrestling is, and they say you just do this because you do the videos, but really not. It's the intertwining story.
Yes.
That you have the main stories on the TV show. And then, for example, so we have all this stuff going on, but when Maurice was gone, or when you're not on the show, you always have a video where we're reminded there, no promotion does that except for WWE in the storytelling. There's so much going on with you currently, but there's always been something going on with you all the time. We know Barnabas is part of, I don't know, the storyline. You're part of the universe of Memphis Wrestling, and they keep doing that. How did you get with Dustin, and who got you in, and tell us how you got to Memphis Wrestling?
Sure. So Maurice, when we first met, he was utilizing a different name, a completely different gimmick. Your timing on this was good because it ties right into what I was saying prior. So it's perfect, man. So he had a completely different persona, completely different character and gimmick. He was already in Memphis, again, doing something completely different. And the idea of the circus came along, and this goes back to what I was saying. I was going to utilize people within the Control Your Narrative system. I decided I'm going to get my own people, and I'm going to put this together myself and present it and see where it goes. The first person I contacted was Maurice, who was not Maurice at that point. And I said to him, are you married to what you're currently doing, or are you open to something completely different? And he, to his credit, he was open to trying something brand new. So then I described to him, this is what I'm thinking. Old school, old style carnival strongman, the red and black stripes, the masquerade mask. I would call you Maurice the Strong. You would be a part of the circus with me. I would be the ringmaster. And he was intrigued, and we found the right gear to accentuate the look. I mean, the guy's always looked like $1,000,000, and now after coming back from injury, he looks, he looks like a Greek god, for crying out loud.
I reached. I don't know him personally, but
Mhm.
when he came back from the injury, I did do the Facebook thing. Reached out to him and said,
Sure.
"Good God, man, you look great. Keep doing what you're doing."
Yeah.
He went from being, he was real green when y'all first started.
Mhm.
Still green on some things, but I'm talking real, just
Sure.
apprehensive. That's one of the things when you're green is, and anyone asks me, you're apprehensive about hitting somebody. Don't be. Lay it in if you have to. It's better to lay it in. He's a little apprehensive. He came back, and I don't know what he did, what training, extra training he was doing, but he came back with that from that injury and had just a fantastic physique. He had that extra thing where if somebody's not doing anything, you don't stand around, you do something. And it's not something you can keep telling somebody unless you're ringside like I used to be, and I would go, get them.
There are times where I am, there are times where I try to give direction ringside. For the most part, that's him. Do I occasionally give instruction? I do, but for the most part, because I don't want to take anything away from his hard work and everything that he's done.
Right.
A lot of what you're talking about has to do with, being confident and secure in yourself and the personality that you're trying to present to the audience. Obviously, a lot of it is just you've gotten enough reps in and experience level. Because I think we all went through that process of at first, you're apprehensive, like in your mind, like I should probably go do this, but like I don't want to ruffle any feathers, I don't want to upset anybody. And then you do it long enough and you're just like, screw it, and just whatever you're feeling.
I remember
you grab somebody, you grab them. So
yeah, I was working one place all the time, had a good rapport with the guys I was working with, and I was a little snug on my. Everybody said you got good punches. Well, I was a little snug. I'll say that. But that
potatoes.
Yeah, no, not that bad. They knew I hit them. Just put it that way. So just a tap. You know what I'm saying? But when I went to the new place, I was apprehensive. I was like, man, I'm not going to lay. I had some guy at ringside. I was supposed to lay it in. And I just barely tapped him in the ring. And he brought me to the side when I got out of the dressing room. It was Big Red, by the way. It's Aaron Roberts' dad. Pulled me to the side and said, look, BT, if you can lay it in. So it's one of those things where you get used to people. And I know that's what's happened to Maurice. But
to finish what I was saying, because there's another huge part of that, and that is sense of urgency relating to the fact that like he and I both, like, we're not kids, like, and he and I have had this conversation on a number of occasions where we know that the window of opportunity of what we're going to be able to accomplish in the wrestling business, like that window is closing further and further and further with every passing day. So it's a matter of trying to make as much of an impact and create as much of a body of work and a legacy as we possibly can. And I think, especially after coming back from the injury, like the reality of all that, like he knew beforehand, but then after the injury, it's like, wow, this could be taken away like that. Because there was definitely a period where he was, and all of us were very uncertain if he was going to be able to return. So when he did, it was okay. We really, like, we have to get down to business and we have to go full steam ahead.
Here's the deal with you. It's different from Maurice. It's different from the. And I'm not saying you're not a worker, but from the workers, the actual wrestler in the ring, you could drop right now, quit managing tomorrow, and be sitting right next to Dustin Starr. I've said this to Matthew Williams also. Both of y'all have that gift of gab. And that's the thing, that as soon as you came on the screen, I was like, I'd never seen you before, which I love. I love seeing people I've never seen before. And I was like, damn, he can talk. And I said, he's been doing this for a while, you know. And I know Ash Taylor hadn't been doing it for a while neither, but that kid can talk too. But you had a persona, you knew who you were, and you know, there's guys learning stuff, and you said not getting in a hurry, but knowing what to do. That is so tough. And I don't, you know, when you're doing 5-minute matches, Dustin has done this where the storyline, the matches they're important. It's the end result. It has nothing to, it's the end result, not that you're going to have a 5-star match. And I've had to pull myself back and say, shut the hell up about the quality of the match. We're not talking about that. We want it to look good, but we're talking about where did it end? And y'all
really what that really translated, what that boils down to is, and it's good that you see that as a viewer, as a fan, and also as a professional in the business. It's really, and this is something that even sometimes people involved really have to stop and understand. It needs to be a point where you have to stop thinking about, okay, we're in this match. Okay, how about we think we're in a segment, and this is the goal of the segment. And the match is helping us to tell the story of where we're going in the segment for what we're trying to do today, and planting the seeds for what we're trying to do as the weeks and months move forward. But if you think about it as, okay, how can we create the best quality segment? How can we achieve the business of this segment? Then it stops being a concern about having these, 5-star, whatever matches.
I mean, I talked to Dustin. I was talking to Dustin. I said, man, you got these guys in the ring for less than 4 minutes. So what the hell are you doing? And he said, no, that segment wasn't 3 minutes. And I said, what? It starts when they walk out, yes. Which is, I know that. The match starts when the manager walks out or the guys walk out the ring and the reaction of the theme song, blah, blah, blah. But as a viewer, as a TV viewer, I wanted 7 minutes. And Dustin said something, no offense to anyone, but he has already said it multiple times. You may not want to watch 7 minutes of this guy. You want the match, the segment, not look at it as the segment, BT, sure. Not the match.
Yes. And that's absolutely it. And that's absolutely it. And the thing with Dustin and why he's such an, like, I consider him a friend, and he's so smart, man. He's so knowledgeable about the business. He's so knowledgeable about not just the business, but the fact that he did, obviously Memphis Grizzlies and his other ventures and, everything that he's done. Like he's just for technically a guy who's younger than me, but he's lived a lot and he's learned a lot and he's so smart about what he does. But one of his greatest gifts, and this is something that everybody used to attribute Paul Heyman for doing, was he would accentuate people's strengths and he would hide their weaknesses. Brother Dustin tries to do the exact same thing in Memphis, where he presents a product where it's very story heavy and story driven, and he does his best to present everyone where we're accentuating the positives and hiding the weaknesses. Because you're right, not everybody is like, their forte is not going to be in a 10, 15, 20-minute match. It's like akin to the glory days of Goldberg. Like, you don't want to see Goldberg go an hour. You want to see
no,
him,
you didn't.
Go
you
2
did
minutes
not.
and kill
Not
somebody. I mean, that same thing with early Road Warriors. Like, you don't want to see the Road Warriors out there for a half hour. You want to see the Road Warriors bum rush the ring, beat the holy bejesus out of somebody and leave. I mean, that was the whole appeal, the whole mystique. So Dustin understands that sometimes talent struggles with that because they want to work and they want to wrestle and they want more of that. But ultimately, Dustin is presenting everyone to the best of his ability and trying to showcase them, not just the best for his purposes and for the TV purposes, but also for the talent. That Memphis TV show is an hour show. When you take the ads out, it's what, 35, 40 minutes max? So, I mean, he's trying to present as much variety and talent on every one of those episodes as he possibly can. and doing 10-minute matches, 15-minute matches.
It's not. Yeah, that's not feasible.
Bro,
It's not feasible.
And with the modern day attention span, it's just not there. Realistically, the only reason why you're getting longer matches on, say, WWE programming is because they've got 3 hours to film.
Right, and they also got a big commercial break right in the middle.
Yes,
and so, yeah, you're right. What
in an hour format, it has to be.
It's tight,
boom, man.
Yeah, you guys got it to a point to where it's a science. That's what I have told some people that say. People say, "Well, I just can't get in it. I just can't." Well, you can't just jump into this show. You got to start episode 100. You got to start episode 1. You got to start somewhere and then get it, because you don't have no idea who Barnabas is, what he's been doing. But here's the cool thing that they do is they always, and let me tell you a secret. I fast forward through this shit, but they show everything that leads up to that match. Dude, I got to do the highlights. But they show everything that leads up to the match, where in case you did just jump on, you know what the heck's going on. So went real quick, and then we'll wrap it up and we'll go into the Patreon version. Where did the idea come from? And Maurice goes down, and the meal ticket. Oh crap, he's hurt. What the hell am I going to do now? How did you end up with the LA Hustlers? Love all those skits. I've been a fan of the LA Hustlers and the whole gimmick since they started, when they was super green. But where did that, and the rapping Rubber Chicken song? Good God, I played it like one time and I couldn't get it. It was an earworm. It was horrible. I was like,
in the best way possible.
So talk to me about LA Hustlers and the rapping Rubber Chicken.
So when Maurice went down with injury, it was devastating for everyone involved, because he and I had started to get some good traction in Memphis, obviously, working a main event caliber program with K Toomer, who has very much been modern day. If Toomer is Lawler and I'm Jimmy Hart. That's the way I feel about it anyway, at least right now. You could probably flip-flop me and Hollywood Jimmy as far as being like the Jimmy Hart to Toomer, but we were working a main event program with him, and then the injury happens, and the momentum we had in Memphis and the eyes we were starting to get on us from other places, everything came to a screeching halt. And none of us knew for certain what the future held. Dustin was kind enough to want to still utilize me on TV. And he had this idea of putting me with different acts over the course of however long before potentially or hopefully Maurice would be back. And we would just do I would try to manage, somebody, and we'd do a couple weeks of that and it wouldn't work out. And then I'd move on to somebody else. That was the original idea. We started with the LA Hustlers. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if I'm seriously trying to schmooze these guys and woo them and want them to believe that I can take them to the tippy top of the tag team scene in Memphis wrestling, I can't just be the ringmaster, because that doesn't make any sense. But okay, so they have a bit of a thug feel. They got the chains, a little bit of a rap vibe.
So you gotta be kind of like them to be friends with them. You gotta blend in. You can't be the ringmaster, the leader.
It's almost like, if you remember when Jimmy Hart managed the Nasty Boys, he started to wear a motorcycle helmet, and he would wear different stuff to accentuate and to match his client. And he did that throughout the years. He would try to match who he was managing. Really, that's what I was trying to do. And without knowing how it was going to go, I had no long-term vision. I just knew, okay, we're going to be doing this for a few weeks and then move on. But the thing is, though, is that I tried to, in the best way I could, fully embrace the idea. Where I didn't just want to kind of sort of do it. I'm like, I need to prove my worth of why I'm even still here. I need to do something that's going to help. Realistically, the reason why I was put with different people is to try to help put the spotlight on them. Because my stupid antics, like, I'll get myself over no matter what. I don't worry about me. But the whole thing is that the more antics that I can help create, the more I can help to put the spotlight onto whoever I'm working with. So it just happened to go where the whole deal with the Hustlers, and then I became Barnabas the producer, and it was just horrible. The horrible rap, the change, the whole nine. It was designed to be horrible, but it was so much fun. It was
And
so much fun.
JT, you was there with JTG. How was he?
Yes, JTG was awesome. He was willing to do whatever. The segment where I got to work with Prince Nana, oh my God.
Oh yeah,
it was incredible. Yeah. All that was fantastic. All that's just like stuff, and these were like, not all my ideas, but a lot of it was my ideas, and just pitching like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, let's try this. And when I came out with the chains and the do-rag, I had the inflatable boom box, and honestly, I was channeling in my mind the films that Gene Wilder would do with Richard Pryor.
Richard Pryor, yes.
And the oddball couple, and Gene would always try to be like the hip guy, and he would never get it right. And he'd be trying to come across like he had soul, and it was terrible.
When they walk into the jail and stir crazy. If you if you want to know what he's talking about, go out of your way to watch that.
That's one of the main visuals I had in my mind was that. So that's what I wanted to do with this.
They were so good in this too. I heard somebody say, I heard how people don't understand what they're doing, and they go, they're not using you guys. And I was like, wait, I've seen them on TV for 10 weeks. They've been on 4 or 5 times, and they're doing this thing with Barnabas. And yeah, do you not understand? They're getting TV time. They're being used, but they were good in this because their characters wanted to win. And they thought the looks that those two guys had, and I bet, as legit as they could be, was looking at you like, this guy's an effing nut.
That's why it was perfect, because
where did the rapping rubber chicken at? Where did you get that at? It's so silly.
So I'm gonna talk to you about the rapping rubber chicken, but to touch on a point that you made a moment ago. It's not always about winning matches. It's about, are you featured on show after show after show? Are you being afforded valuable TV time? Is the angle or the story that you're involved in, is that spotlighted? Because the Hustlers didn't win a single match with me, which just adds more to the story. But it was never about that. It was always about this weird dynamic between themselves and me. And yes, to your point, these guys are so desperate to win, even though they look at me like, who is this goof? But there was always that little shred of hope, like, well, maybe
he's going to lead us to a win.
Maybe he sounds confident and convincing. Maybe that, again, I was always the carny all the way through. It was just this was just a different variation, but the core character of Barnabas the Ringmaster was always there. It was just, we just showed a different variation of it. But the rapping rubber chicken. So I had been toying with the idea of using a rubber chicken as a prop for a while. And Maurice and I actually, just on a day we had off from the road, we went to an Oddities and Curiosities Expo. They may come through Memphis, I'm not sure. Or they may come through Arkansas too. But it's like this huge convention you can go to. It's got all this, bizarre, odd stuff. But the one we went to, they had one of the vendors there, had different items, and one of the items they had was the classic rubber chicken. And again, I'd been thinking about getting one for a while. So once I saw, I'm like, okay, this is fate. This is destiny. I've got to get this rubber chicken. So I got the rubber chicken, and then I started to incorporate it into the act. And I would utilize it periodically. And on a drive home from Memphis with Maurice, we were just talking. And sometimes this happens. I get these way out there ideas. And I'm like, wouldn't it be interesting and fun if over the course of a number of weeks, I just keep showing up with a bigger and bigger rubber chicken until I get to the point where I actually have somebody in a rubber chicken suit. And Maurice ended up finding a rubber chicken suit. I'm like, oh my God. So we had the rubber chicken suit, and then it was a matter of figuring out what we wanted to do. And then I had the idea of doing a god-awful rap song.
Because you were with the LA Hustlers. They're
yeah,
cool.
so this is all.
You
this
want to be
I was
cool with them. Yeah.
I was with the Hustlers, and I'm like, you know, and the whole idea of I was starting to do stuff with Clown, our DJ.
That's why they say you went to the DJ thing. And said,
to be honest, we never got to this point, but you know, I was hoping that maybe we could build to a point where the rapper Al Capone that does the whoop that trick song,
right,
and he's done stuff with Memphis before. To be honest, I was hoping that I could keep pushing the whole rap and producer idea until maybe we could bring him in and we could do something, because I had no issue with, as we say in the business, putting him over. We never got to that point. But so a lot of ideas. I thought about doing the rap song, and then I'm like, how can I make this as ridiculous as possible? And then I thought about it, and I'm looking at the rubber chicken, and I've got the rubber chicken outfit, and I'm like, rapping rubber chicken. And then I started to write these ridiculous lyrics. And then I started putting together the music video. And I was hoping it was going to go viral, which it didn't. But you know, that's just how things go sometimes, is that you make, you know, goofy stuff and you hope that it catches on, that it goes wildfire. It's crazy the things that catch on and don't. At the Grind City Rumble, we had Eugene, and Eugene's chasing me around, and he ends up taking my top hat and putting it on. That thing got like a ridiculous amount of views.
And you don't know, man.
God bless you, Eugene.
Yeah.
I hope you come back to Memphis, because I'd love to do more business with you. But you never know. But regardless, it was still fun, and we ended up utilizing that whole thing with Prince Nana coming and paying a visit to Memphis, where it was like a few different ideas that I had pitched ended up getting combined. And with the fact that Prince Nana's client, the AEW World Champ Swerve Strickland, is involved with music. He does his own music. He's involved with the music industry. It's like we can utilize that, and I can try to schmooze Nana so that I can get a record contract with
right.
And his people. It all in a goofy, ridiculous way. It all came together and it all made sense. The day that we did the segment with Nana, we've got the rubber chicken outfit, and we've got a young fella that was willing to go into it for us, and I thanked him profusely for it. We get him set in the back. I'm obviously out there with Nana. The rubber chicken shows up. Something happens inside the rubber chicken outfit where the battery pack is beginning to be dislodged. Those outfits have like a fan in them where it has to constantly on because it's blowing air, keeping it inflated.
Right. Okay.
So the thing starts to get disconnected. So he comes out and he's starting to deflate. And the head of the chicken is starting to droop off to the side. And I'm mortified. I'm like, oh my God. Because in my mind, I'm like, man, this is going to be great. Prince Nana is hot right now. He's doing his dance. Like he's probably the hottest manager in wrestling. I get to share some TV time with him. Woohoo!
Get to rub, man. Get to rub.
Yes, man. And then the rubber chicken comes out, and the rubber chicken's head is, and I'm mortified. And Nana's playing it off. He was fantastic. He ad-libbed great. I tried to react to him really well. I'm picking the head of the chicken up and holding it up as it's deflated. And I'm, whacking him, going like, what's wrong with you? And it's probably, and I've done some ridiculous stuff in my career. That was probably the hands down the most ridiculous segment I've ever been a part of. And it's honestly one of those segments that I'm most proud of. Because a lot of it was ideas that I had pitched that we were able to bring to fruition.
You said something you just don't know. I think one of my videos has got almost 1 million, and it's MKZ going through a table with a hit. And I'm like, I produced this podcast that was a spoof of Dark Side of the Ring, and I spent 20 hours on it. I think it's the greatest thing ever. And I look at it and it gets just the normal, X amount that I get for all the, this was supposed to be the podcast. Everyone said BT knew what the hell he was doing. And it's so funny. And and I was like, oh shit. But yeah, that's what happened. Hey guys, we're going to get off here. We're going to go to Patreon. As you know, Barnabas is part of all episodes Memphis in May, and we do 5 questions on Patreon. It's only going to be on the Memphis app. You can see it on members only in July, or you're watching it right now. It's going to be on Patreon.
Save the best for last, and if you want a little bit more, go on over to Patreon right now.
That's right. We're here, same bad time, same bad channel, on the best little wrestling podcast in the business, even though we went 1.5 hours almost. It's
because
not little
from
anymore.
The bottom all the way to the tippy top.
Be there, Barnabas. Do you know this? Everybody knows this. You got to know this. I love my mama.